Before you start watching this video, look at the timestamp and how long the video is. I'm warning you right now, this video is going to be very difficult to stay engaged with because it's going to be just me talking at the camera for that freaking long. This video is supposed to be about Blue and Augustus and their relationship. And it doesn't really provide any new concept art or content. Instead, what these new sets of videos that I'm planning for is supposed to be for is me writing by talking about my project and the themes that I want to play on, and just all of my thoughts, raw, slightly edited, but for the most part unscripted. So, without further ado, last night I was trying to write in my Obsidian and my Scrivener. And I was listening to this epic, majestic music that I had never heard before, though it was just orchestrated noise, if we're being completely honest. You see, I was looking at, in my mind, the two characters that I have, Blue and Augustus. And I'm looking at this and I'm like, okay, relationships in writing can be created to be made interesting. And I've got to figure out how to do that and create characteristics in the characters themselves that build on each other and create a relationship that turns the gears in the audience's mind. However, we have a problem. This problem is that we have boy character and girl character come together and cling on to each other for dear life because they have nothing else in this world. And you have heard that 1,000 times before. If you've ever watched movies before about any kind of romance novel, that is every fucking romantic relationship ever. And it is the laziest writing. It is the laziest, most uninteresting writing. Because they didn't have options, so they did it together. But what I want is to create an ace relationship. An asexual relationship, because the boy is 9 and the girl is 8. And I understand I needed a companion at that age. That's one of the appeals right there, right? One of the appeals to this relationship is the fact that I wanted a relationship like this when I was 8 or 9 years old. Secondly, this is a relationship that has to click based on the characteristics of the characters. 2, the core story that we're trying to tell. That's 3. 3, the core story that we're trying to tell is a boy and a girl, both children, have a relationship that is interesting and it works, right? And then we make one of them start to kind of slip away. Why? Because they question their own worth. They question their own worth and constantly wonder whether or not they're the one that's supposed to be filling that role for this other person when this other person doesn't give a shit about whether or not the character that's slipping away is worth their time or ready for them or worth being the protector, which is actually the role. Now, the protector role belongs to Augustus. And the other role, which is Blue, she struggles with something else. And it actually challenges me here. Blue struggles with a voice in her head that is her own voice. And it's not Mindscape like some might believe after the final product comes out. No, it's her voice. And it's saying, wouldn't it be better for the people who claim to love you if you just let go and let the threats of the world kill you? She has a desire for the sweet embrace of death because she feels as though her constant need for protection is burdening her friend Augustus. And if she were to just die, he wouldn't have to worry about her anymore. But she clings on to life for some reason. She keeps holding on and letting her friend struggle. Until one day, a threat comes that he cannot defend her from, and she is attacked. And the story branches off into two directions here, I'm thinking, because we are working within the game medium. If the player has been developing trust with Blue, trust being a mechanic within the game. And if you have trust with Blue, if you've acquired that, story goes this way. If you haven't acquired it, the story goes the other way. And the gameplay kind of picks its faction for you and how you develop your abilities. So, like, two different skill trees is the idea. If you have not earned Blue's trust, here's what happens. When they get raided, it's, in my mind currently, the inciting incident that the audience sees and is invested in. The treehouse that Blue and Augustus like to hang out at gets raided by either meth heads, the neighbors, an angel, or all three of these things to team up against Loki, the player, not really understanding the difference between Blue and Loki, that they're working with a demon. They just know they're working with a demon, but they don't know that there's a child in there that's completely devoid of the evil that is that. But she's not exactly selling us that she's not a demon. It's something I came up with recently. Is Blue looks like a really dirty child. And I thought recently, what if I were to play on that? What if she specifically does, like, unladylike, unattractive things? Like picking her nose, or sitting weird, or falling asleep funny in the way that babies do, you know. But at the same time, it's like, I don't know, that might mess with tone. So that's Blue, but there's more. It's like, why does this relationship work? We know that Blue's thing that she does in the relationship to make it just kind of like show its workings is she actually is very good at balance. I've decided. She's good at running on things. Like a fence, for instance. So she can run along the top of a fence and balance on it and like tight roping just really, really fast. And so when there's a whole bunch of backyards together, she can just run on that fence. And if there is another fence that's blocking somebody from going this way, but she's running on this one here, she can just go to the very next fence. It doesn't matter if it's like this or like this. She can just hop over to that somebody who's chasing her by foot on the ground is going to have to climb over the fence to keep chasing her. And there is a scene that I'm writing that I'm trying to note that I did play on that. I did play on that. And that's the first time that the audience gets to see her ability to balance around things. But however, her abilities are balance at its core. And she also understands how to ride a skateboard and a scooter and roller skates maybe. But I'm thinking the main thing that she's really good at is skateboards. And the player, if they acquire trust, they're gonna get that ability, because the two branches, right? Two branches of skill tree with blue and skill tree without blue. If you haven't acquired Blue's trust, what happens is Blue listens to the voice inside her head and she embraces death. And when that happens, there's that little space inside the characters' heads where they just kind of, there's Mindscape. And Mindscape is very picky and choosy of who gets to be in control of the body. There's this inciting incident and something happens. If there is not trust, Blue leaves the scene. She walks into a crack that's in a void that's in this scape, this endless plane. There's a crack and Blue walks through it, and that is her leaving the body, accepting and embracing death. But then, if you have Blue's trust, what you get is the ability to switch between who you can play as, Blue or Loki. And that is the two different skill trees. If you have Blue, the Blue skill tree, you get to do things like evading sunlight during the day by yourself, and you get to have some of Blue's skill sets, skateboards, roller skates, scooters, things like that. But if you don't have Blue, if you've rejected or not earned her trust, and Blue accepts and embraces death, the alternate thing is that you get to have a little bit more control of your demonic abilities in Act 1, where you get to corrupt the environment and make these little hyper-tube tunnel thingies that you transport yourself through during the day to get around the map without being in the sun. Because like a vampire, I'm thinking the sun burns Loki. It's like a weakness to her. But if you have the ability to switch between Blue and Loki at will, you just switch to Blue, you play as Blue, and you walk around in the sun, and you're fine. You're fine in the sun. And if people throw salt at you, if people throw, your weaknesses at you, Blue doesn't care. Blue's fine. She's just a human girl. She's a human girl. She's immune to these things that the demon would normally be weak to, Loki. So, in turn, these two branching parts of the game itself are what come out of this whole inciting incident ordeal. But last night, I came up with something that gave me a little bit of a look-see-loo into this relationship a little bit more. So I was listening to epic music, and I created this letter. I should explain that Augustus is going to die at the end of Act 1. But I was imagining this super cliche scene of him just being in a casket and being sent away in the river, and Blue is crying her heart out. And over the casket floating away, I was thinking of trying to evoke emotion in the audience by having this letter be read. I know that you're hurting inside, enough to think that you're not good enough to be at my side. enough to feel like you need to run away from me to better yourself for me. So I will run as fast as I can to you. I will catch you. So that deep down you know, in your heart, that I understand that you're afraid of not being worth it. Because for a time I shared that fear. That I was only burdening you with my need for protection. I failed you, and for that I am sorry. He just responded to it. What the hell? Not Donuts, my boy. So, Not Donuts responded to the letter that I had actually sent him a little copy and pasted version of on Discord. And just as I had finished reading it to the freaking camera, that was a very interesting coincidence indeed. But we had a little bit of a discussion about all of this, and I came up with some ideas, and he came up with some ideas. Um, I was talking about the cliche that we're stuck in, where boy character and girl character come together and, cling on to each other for dear life. And then neglect making the characters interesting or the relationship interesting. The cliche I am seeing right now is like the foundation that we can just kind of like put more into, figure out what's missing and put more into the parts that are missing, fill the voids. And I'm thinking a lazy writer doesn't really understand how to make a relationship interesting. They just kind of they make the relationship happen and they force it to be a thing and they romanticize the fuck out of it, but then don't think about characteristics within the relationship that would make it work or be interesting. Now, Monsieur Not Donuts, as we're calling him, he said that there's always going to be an attachment between them, otherwise, like, they're not friends and the whole plot breaks down. There are two ways that he sees to separate from the cliche. Disproportionate attachment between Augustus and Blue. I've already been advocating for this, in his words. I've already been advocating for this practically since hearing anything about the story. And additional attachments for either character or each character would suffice in doing this. I wouldn't be surprised if there were other ways, but that's all he can think of off of the top of his head. And when I saw him say this, I was like, yes, actually. I've thought of that, and I've got a few more ideas of my own. And one of the things that I was trying to do in my head was give Augustus and Blue an actual character dynamics between them and get creative with that. It's like, what do I see with this character that is Blue? Well, Blue looks like a very dirty child, actually, right? That's one of the things, but I came up with a few more other things as well. Augustus is Blue's comfort zone. She does not feel the need to branch out and find other people because then she would have to put herself in literal danger of other people she doesn't trust. So, because she has trust issues, basically, and for good reason, because she dealt meth out to some people that could take advantage of her from anywhere in an outside relationship. And he pointed out this really good idea. We have another character that we haven't been talking about in this video, Mesra. the merchant. She is like a mother figure, and she could be like an emotional guide for Blue as well as for Loki. And that would provide something outside of the Blue and Augustus relationship, making a little bit more influence come into that relationship and do stuff. Though it's going to be difficult to do that because I don't see Blue meeting Mesra until after the inciting incident. So that's a thing, because like Mesra comes into the picture when Loki is in control. Loki finds Mesra because she's haunting people, the way that the player does. Because whenever Loki is in control, the player is given control to do things, unless at like key points in time where there has to be like a cutscene where Loki has to do like cutscene stuff. But I kind of don't know if I want to do that because I don't want to take control away from the player. And I kind of want to avoid doing that as little as possible. So, and then I went into this thought further. The real reason for Blue staying with Augustus is because she lacks the ability to be hygienic. We've said this before. And she does some things that are kind of gross sometimes. I'm thinking like picks her nose, or burp loudly, or make crude jokes sometimes. Others dislike her because of this behavior, while Augustus is amused sometimes. This behavior, however, was learned from Augustus. So I've gone into the idea that they forged each other, Blue and Augustus. So most likely there is some behavior that comes from Augustus that he learned from Blue, but I'm not sure what that is yet. If I really wanted to go down that route, I don't know. And I pointed out, like having Mesra, I'm going to say it again, having Mesra as a thing to try to break out of the cliche is a good idea. Because that's outside of the relationship. But I think it's important to define at its core the Blue plus Augustus relationship. Act 1, at its heart, the thing that the audience will invest themselves in emotionally will be this relationship. And so making it well thought out will make the inciting incident and his death all the more emotionally charged in the way that we want them to be. In my studies, a negative character arc leads to a character's death, most of the time. And if you want the character to arc in this way, you have to give them something that they accept as a false truth. I think I found that false truth that leads Augustus to his end, because Augustus is going to have a negative character arc, and that's what causes his demise. And so this this false truth is that he has to become powerful in order to be worthy of any kind of love, because he basically lost his friend in his mind. And even though she came back, even though she could be coming back in one branch of the story and letting him know that she's alive, I've decided that he's got other influences that are telling him to stay away from her, because she has a demon that she is fully aware of. And Augustus is with a priest at this time. When he's going through his negative arc, he's with a priest that's telling him that she is his wolf in sheep's clothing. But the priest is, in turn, actually his wolf in sheep's clothing. So he's pointing the finger at somebody else when it should be getting pointed at himself. And that is the idea that I wanted to play on there, because there's a lot of people that do that kind of thing IRL. I also came up with this other theme. Too much of a person around you can be a poison to a relationship. This is something that I personally experienced during COVID with a roommate of mine, where I won't get into details about, but yes, I was kind of thinking, if Blue and Augustus are like, basically, all they really want to spend time around, that could be poison to the relationship, and it effectively could be what causes them to doubt themselves and their value to the relationship, where Blue thinks that she could be better off gone and dead, so that Augustus doesn't have to worry about her. But then Augustus feels the need to worry about her anyway because he does care. But does that show that their relationship is poisoning? No, there's too much of the relationship that's poisoning? Probably not. But that is an idea that I've kind of thought of, and I'm just gonna put that onto my obsidian and play on that. So here, look at this. I'm going to add a card into the ideas that don't work tab, and I'm going to copy from the DMs directly where I said, too much of a poison around you. No, too much of a person around you can be a poison to a relationship. That is a theme that could be a part of the Blue and Augustus relationship. That was another idea. Looking at my DMs, Blue's death drive gets demonstrated through dialogue. I'm thinking in the inciting incidents where she is dying on the floor. Dying on the floor, and he has one last interaction with her before they get separated for a time. And that last piece of dialogue that comes out of Blue changes Augustus, making him feel as though he cannot be worthy of anyone ever again until he acquires the power to keep loved ones around. And if Blue is not dead, he pushes her away because he knows, even with angel wings, because he acquires those, that he is not ready for some other reasons that I have yet to come up with. That's actually a thing we put into the obsidian now. Add a card, go to Discord, copy, paste, and we're not going to put it into the ideas that don't work. We're going to put it into something that feels a little bit more final, at least for now. We're going to create another card because I feel like this is important to state. Blue has a death drive. Augustus has self-doubt. Blue is attacked. Have both of these ideas connect to that. Blue allows herself to be killed, and Augustus sees this, but when she tells him why she let it happen, he goes off screen and accepts his need for change. When Augustus comes back to the screen, he is unrecognizable because of change, but is still not ready to let anyone into his life. However, with all of that being said, we've got these dynamics of inner conflicts that are happening between characters and inside internally of characters. But how have we broken out of boy-girl latching onto each other because nobody else in the world will accept the cliche? I don't know, because like it's still the base. It's still there. We've just kind of given it more to stack on top of that and explain why. why that is the case, rather than change that base, that foundation we've built on top of it. Um, but is that breaking out of the cliche? I don't think so. Probably not. If it was the cliche, it would be not interesting. If it was, since it's not the cliche though, we have other elements coming into here after this. Um, because the inciting incident there, that's supposed to be like, oh shit, the storyteller is capable of pulling these kinds of moves, this kind of shit. Um, and so, yeah, I think it might be better, but I'm not sure. Which is why I'm actually making this YouTube video about Augustus and Blue, is because I have this concern. It's super risky of being one of those cliche things, but also it's not, because I've used it as a foundation, used the cliche as the foundation rather than just use the foundation. I don't know if that's a bad thing. I have to have other people's input on that because I don't have enough experience as a writer to be able to go, that's bad, get rid of it, delete it, do it again. Because I like what's there. Right? I kind of like what's there, but I have mixed feelings about it. Because the cliche relationship, it happens all the way to like the inciting incident. And then boop, there is that part where they separate and they have to discover themselves, who they really are without each other. Which is kind of playing into that throwaway idea a little bit, but not consciously, not in a way that the audience can specifically see, where they were spending too much time in the relationship to see it from the outside perspective and see they were preventing their own personal character development from being together, if that makes sense. So I suppose maybe we're playing on that, but I'm not sure. If there's something that I could do to like play into that and show that, seeing it from the outside perspective and being in the relationship that was preventing them from development, the characters themselves see that. I mean, that's the way you could go about it. Now that we're thinking about it that way. So I suppose we can grab that idea in Obsidian out of like the recycle trash bin thingy of useless ideas and turn it into an idea that is potentially useful. So too much of a person can be a poison in a relationship. Or how about too much of a... We have this card here. Too much of a relationship can be a poison to a relationship and prevent personal development. And then next to that, I have a connecting idea. Seeing the issues from inside the relationship are not as easy when you are inside the box that is the relationship. Not Donuts is currently busy, so his ability to reply has been a little bit up in the air. But he has done so again. And he said some stuff that sparked some discussion and gave me some new ideas. He said, the reason cliches are problematic is because they are crutches that result in one-dimensional characters and flat, unarcing dynamics. Watching out for cliches is all well and good, But if you focus too much on them, your attempts to avoid the cliche could get in the way of actually writing. In fact, you are likely to have other cliches emerge as a result. I'm not like other girls cliche, but a story structure. And I asked him, do you see uh, that with the ideas that I've presented up here? And he's actually like, no. But I also don't see the boy and girl cling to each other because options in their world are little to none cliche. I sent him an image of the stuff that I literally just made in the last clip, and I said, finding a theme for the relationship overall to play on here. That's what I did. Based on the beats that are already there. Boom. New idea just freaking hit me. I got a new idea. Augustus is afraid of coming back to the relationship because it will prevent him from achieving his goal of becoming powerful enough to be worthy of protecting the people he loves. So back into our Obsidian, we create another card, go to Discord, copy and paste this idea. That isn't supposed to be like that. So some time has passed. Not Donuts has not responded yet, but I've been doing some external research on some writing stuff because our friend Schnee came out with another video, and it was like probably almost 2 hours long in one YouTube video, and he was cramming a whole lot of like writing advice from the people who wrote Arcane, and little bits and pieces he's gathered on like their little tricks and techniques that they were using on like how to create like the best goddamn possible story, or at least for that one in particular. I'm gonna play a clip from that specific video for you right now, and then I'm gonna show my comment on that specific little thingy.
That's a lovely poetic image, right? But it wasn't telling the story of the series, which is these two sisters being torn apart.
It's not an overly complex point about openings, but it's also just so easy to lose sight of. Use your opening as an opportunity to frame your whole story. Your first scene will communicate what this whole thing is. And that's something that you should use. You should be purposeful in that. It is really important for your audience to know what to focus on from moment one. And that's even if you're going to surprise them with what it's actually about later on, you can still do that. But in the meantime, direct their attention. That's helpful to them. That feels good to the audience. It feels good to see, okay, the sisters. This is about the sisters. Even if you don't know this is about identity and science and monsters and bunny and whatever, you don't need to communicate a theme, just what to focus on. The sisters is what you should be focusing on. Feeling lost or feeling like a narrative is aimless for the first 50 pages of a novel or the first 20 minutes of a movie, it's just a terrible story experience you should be actively trying to avoid as a writer. At best, the audience is bored. At worst, they're frustrated. But if I have a focus, then I can feel like I'm building an understanding. I'm following something, I'm on a road going somewhere, that's great, I'm engaged.
That video I will be leaving a link to in the description so that you can check it out for yourself if you really want to get a whole bunch of really good information. Focus on one thing that helps set the tone and the theme for the story as a whole, as if to show what the story is going to be about at its core. That thing for the audience to focus on. And if you as a writer do not know what your story is at its core, at its center, it's back to the drawing board. Discover more, character Bible dev, and more. Look for the answer in the rest of the story to find out more about what the story is as a whole, all the way to its core. Almost like digging, if you ask me. This stands out as I have been seeing a need to rewrite the start of my story that Schnee here, by the way, had the pleasure of reading himself. I know that I'm calling it Smell of Fear. But I don't know how that goes into the main narrative. Though I'm starting to understand how I might get to that point, I still don't viscerally know.
Where you have two characters layered on top of each other, or two complete ways of understanding a character. There's a superficial mold that they kind of seem to fit into before we become acquainted with a much more complex understanding of who they are. Here you're writing a good, compelling plotline that's just not going to happen. And then there's another plotline out there that's really different and even more coherent and thematic or whatever, and then pick your perfect moment where it's all going to switch, and then, watch your audience's jaws drop to the floor. And a lot of the way you get to this, a lot of the way you do it, has to do with characters making imperfect decisions. This is something Christian mentions explicitly. We wanted all of our characters to be real and thus make imperfect decisions. In a logical world, in a perfect world, you have X happening 100% of the time. And that's really our two plot lines. We got people making perfect decisions, and then we got the little imperfections of humanity creeping in and leading to imperfect decisions, which leads to everything we fear. And that's the other way of breaking this down. One plotline is the optimistic one, the other is realistic or pessimistic. It's everything we fear. We expect the first and try not to see the second because we like to be hopeful and positive, but by the time the second one shows itself, we kind of already knew it was there. So to formulate the advice, use perfect decision making to set up an optimistic plotline, and use human imperfection to lay the groundwork for your inevitable realistic plotline.
Let's look at that piece of writing again. Use perfect decision making to set up an optimistic plotline. And then use human imperfection to set up, actually like this. Optimistic plotline, human imperfections to lay down groundwork for inevitable realistic plotline. So the audience has to be convinced we're going this way. But we have to lay down the imperfections properly so that there is a believable failure from the protagonist. So I currently have right now a plot line where we have a relationship that looks cliche. But when the inciting incident happens, it does so because of some things that have been coming our way, and the bad thing happens because of the character's self-doubt. Having seen that Augustus can clean house on these kinds of enemies, to be overwhelmed by them or something and lose his friend, it pulls the rug from under the audience, because we're like, what? And the reason it happens is because he's doubting himself. And so there's that. It also happens because Blue has been getting ready to embrace death. It's because of that voice in her head telling her it's time to let go for your friend. He can't protect you this time. And then she is believably dead. With all of that being said, we have these two pieces of advice that we've just looked at right here. And I have mentioned the two that I have commented on in the video, these 2 points of advice, because they are valid at the moment of making this video for what we are trying to accomplish. I have said before, I want to rewrite the beginning of my story, Smell of Fear. However, all these really good ideas that I've compiled together to do that, to make this story that is Smell of Fear at its start, doesn't really latch on to a core idea. And there's a reason for that. It's because I, as a writer, didn't really know what the core story of Smell of Fear was. I didn't know what my core theme was. As a result of this, I don't really have all the answers I need to be able to create or rewrite the beginning of my story, Smell of Fear. Now, I do have writing out there. I have writing out there that you can access now. But I'm not promoting it fully yet because I haven't found what the core of my story is yet. And so, yeah, back to the drawing board, Bible dev, more development of story is needed before I can figure out what the core of the story is. I know that the story is about this demonic child that is haunting people because she is filling her inner void. And we have this human child that is questioning whether or not she is worthy of life, I suppose. So, but they're sharing the same body. So these are two kind of like ideas that may or may not contrast with each other. And at the start of the story, we have a child who was abandoned by her godfather, who is supposed to be the final boss of this story. But then he just kind of doesn't get screen time for the majority of the story in Act 1. And he loses his relevancy. And the audience does that exact thing that Schnee was pointing out, where the first 15 to 20 minutes of the film does not frame, or the game, I should say, the start of the game does not frame the core of the story and what it's about. What is the core of the fucking Smell of Fear story? I know that something I have been exploring in my head non-viscerally before Schnee said it. What is my story at its center? I don't know yet. But one idea that I've played with is Smell of Fear is about a demonic child who is trying to find her way through a world that hates her. And here we are exploring this part of the main narrative about two completely different characters that do not contrast with that other theme, a child who is hated versus a child that questions their relevancy to be worthy to live. So these are two ideas, and they kind of don't mix together very well. And the reason for this, I believe at this time, is actually because I haven't discovered what it is Loki is doing. I haven't developed the world in that area. I have no idea what the world story... Okay, I have some idea. The world story is one thing. Character story is another. I know that Loki, she is haunting people. She is causing world conflict. She is, or at least she's contributing to the world conflict. But she's not thinking about the consequences. So this gets us a step closer. It's like, Loki. World conflict. Consequences. That's a theme. That's a theme right there. Yes. We gotta put it into Obsidian. What is the story at its core? Well, consequences and not thinking about them. Loki is abandoned, I know, because she does things and doesn't think about the consequences. After being directly affected by the consequences, however, Loki learns a lesson. There has to be a second one, though, keeping in mind those that are naturally close to you. That's one idea. But like, how does this get us closer to the core? Because she is put away because she's not thinking about the consequences of her actions. She's just having fun. She's doing what she wants to do. Loki is having fun. Doing what she wants to do without any regard of the world around her. We also know that Loki is abandoned by her father. This really recognized that we kind of already knew, but we didn't really think about. Loki is abandoned by her father because of this same reason. What is this same reason? Loki's having fun. She's doing what she wants to do without any regard of the world around her. And consequences and not thinking of them. So that's playing on that a little bit more. But where does that take us? Throughout the story. Where's the tragedy in not thinking about the consequences? The inciting incident. But there has to be an incident before that causes her to be abandoned, a mistake that she makes, something that she does with a complete disregard, like, fuck you, fuck the rules, fuck the world, fuck expectations, fuck society. Does something that make people around her just kind of go, goodbye, you little shit, fuck you. Which at least that's what her father does, to try to teach her. I'm thinking in his mind he's trying to teach her by not teaching her, by letting her experience natural consequences and throwing her out into the world. This conversation at the start of this video was supposed to be about Blue and Augustus, but I did research and now it has changed to the topic of this video. This video has gone on for almost an hour and it is time for me to wrap things up and keep making video and keep talking, just upload this discussion topic of conversation and work on the next video. Just keep working on this conversation that we're branching off into and let it be that next thing. Finding the core of the story.